All right. So, hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Elaine Garrity Warner. I work with the City of Culver City. I'm an economic development project manager, and I'm working with our Economic Recovery Task Force for the City of Culver City. Today, it's my pleasure and privilege to be facilitating this creative economy and entertainment panel this morning. And we have an outstanding panel and some really interesting topics and important topics to discuss. And so, to that end, I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit and provide some context about Culver City. Our community was founded in the entertainment industry, and its roots were in film. But over time, it's evolved into a creative industry that's expanded to several different types of industries and technology. So this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected those industries and what the future looks like. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our outstanding panel this morning. Firstly, we have Donna Washington. She's the Vice President of Operations from Film LA. So we're going to ask each panelists to give a little bit of an introduction to themselves, and then we'll start with the questions. So Donna, give us a little bit of background. Tell us about Film LA. Tell us about you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Elaine. And good morning to everyone. I've been with Film LA since its inception in 1995. In my role as Vice President of Operations, I partner and collaborate with community representatives, filmmakers, and government clients in the greater Los Angeles area, including Culver City. I oversee permit operations, production planning, field services, and I work closely with our community relations arm and communications department.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here this morning. And thank you for being on our Economic Recovery Task Force.
Thank you.
The second person we have today is Len Dichter. He's the creative director and partner for a very good agency. He's also one of our cultural affairs commissioners spearheading our creative economy reports. So Len, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I'm really excited to be here. This is just a terrific event. As you said, I serve on the Culver City Cultural Affairs Commission. I'm now closing out my second term, which will end in June 2021. Served as chair for 2 consecutive terms, and now I'm currently vice chair. Professionally, my background is in advertising and film as a creative director and commercial documentary director. My company, a very good agency, is a hybrid creative agent production company, founded in Culver City. Recently moved out of Culver City to the Valley, to Van Nuys, where we've just opened an 11,000 square foot office soundstage facility, which was always on the cards for us, but pandemic kind of accelerated that. We needed to come more indoors and film out. We needed to bring the world in here. So our soundstage, which is open but just finishing construction, is really tilted more towards virtual production than practical production. VR, AR, green screen, motion capture, LED staging, etc.
Well, that is the perfect segue into Tammy. So Tammy is our Chief Legal Officer with Dreamscape Immersive, which is here in Culver City and Fox Hills. Woohoo! And tell us about the virtual and augmented work that you do at Dreamscape Immersive.
Yeah, so Dreamscape has been in Culver City for the last 4 years, and we're still a pretty young company, but we are a location-based virtual reality company. We have a site in LA at the Century City Westfield Mall, which has been closed given COVID, but our sites in Dallas and Dubai are back open. And we have always wanted to expand outside of entertainment, and we had already been working with Arizona State University on a partnership around education. So the timing was perfect. That already was in the works prior to COVID. So we are working with them, and you'll start to see Dreamscape educational content through ASU and their online learning at the end of this year and into next year. So, Dreamscape is still plugging along and, trying to get through COVID like everyone else.
So I think that's an important distinction. So at the beginning of COVID, when everything was shut down, filming was shut down, and that has downstream effects. That affects what shows we're watching and how people are engaging, and even with gaming and entertainment. So those are huge impacts. Just for the panels today, we're missing one of our key panelists. He's still trying to get on because technology, although creative, is not perfect. So we are missing Keith Weaver, Executive Vice President for Global Policy and External Affairs of Sony Pictures Entertainment. I needed to read that because it's a big title. And Keith, we miss you. So hopefully you're going to jump on here really soon, but he is in our chat. So we'll hopefully get started here. And then Keith, just hopefully you can jump on. So let's talk about our first question. And as Tammy inferred, the pandemic's really changed the way that we do things, especially for your industry. So can you guys each share how your company and industry has pivoted to the pandemic, and what are the challenges ahead as we continue to face, several more months of, impinged activity?
Okay.
So Donna, start us off. Tell us
Well,
about FilmLA. How
well,
have you changed?
like
How have you
everyone
pivoted?
else, we went to 100% remote work plan. And we instituted our business continuity plan, which basically meant that we reduced active staff to 25%. We put 50% of our workforce on furlough. We continued to cover their health benefits. But like other businesses, we had no revenue from March until June when the governor decided to resume filming. Right now, we're at about 60% of staff, and we're at about 40% of what we normally would be doing in terms of permitting. And so, it's getting harder to process permits because it's harder to find places for production companies to park. It's harder to manage, community complaints, and we're having to maneuver the industry with the County Department of Health protocols, and so everything's far more complex. And then also, just recently with the stay-at-home orders, people were constantly questioning: is the industry still exempt? They still are exempt. But it's probably for another question. But yes, it's gotten a lot harder to get things moving and progressing with less staff.
And so with all of the county health protocols that are in place and making it more complicated, and the finding locations to film, and obviously with everyone at home, that obviously presents challenges, but filming continues, filming goes on. Are you seeing an uptick in filming at all now? Or is it you said it was at 40%? Are people starting to come back to try and, build pilot seasons?
All of that is not normal
product
anymore. We are hopeful that it's going to continue to on upswing. Our numbers, we just published our recent numbers, but I think our highest permitting month was October. Obviously, November we had, we had Thanksgiving, and there's all kinds of other things that were going on. We had an election. There's other things that were affecting what was going on with projections. So the numbers.
It's been busy. It's been a busy
so things
pandemic.
Kind of decreased in November, but we're hoping, and unlike other years, I think we're actually going to see filming going all the way through the holidays, which would be nice. So hopeful.
Okay.
Oh, that was cute.
Great. Keith
Keith.
He's made it to the party. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to put a pin in that. Thank you so much, Donna. Keith, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Okay, so everyone, this is Keith Weaver, Executive Vice President, Sony Pictures Entertainment, External Global Policy and Affairs. I'm sure I got that wrong. But Keith, tell us about. It's a lot. Tell us about yourself a little bit, and then we'll keep going on the same question. In case you didn't hear it, was how has your industry has pivoted with the pandemic, and what are the challenges you're facing? And so go ahead and introduce and then just jump right in.
Keith Weaver, Executive Vice President, Global Policy and External Affairs. I get tripped over that too, and I've been in this role for a long time. I'm approaching 20 years at Sony Pictures Entertainment, which of course is here in Culver City, the heart of Screamland. We are a global business. What's really great about the entertainment industry is that we pivoting is part of what we do. It's how we operate. We build things. We blow up things. We make things. We inspire things. It's just the way we work, really. So while obviously 2020 brings challenges none of us could have ever imagined, we're adjusting. So the way we produce things, yes, it's different, but our future forecast from my perspective is bright. And that's because, as we've all seen, sitting at home, you're doing really one of a few things. Maybe you're drinking, maybe too much. But what you're also doing is you're being entertained. There are all kinds of new content offerings, and certainly as we find ourselves in this really renaissance for TV content and streaming content and cable and all of that, really to have the full complete picture, pardon the pun, is to have that theatrical experience. Certain films, certain creators are looking to get their work into a big screen. The way you see certain content is different depending on the nature of the content, right? And so in the future, where it's brighter and COVID behind us or managed, I think that societally we'll want to have that shared experience, right? And going to a movie is still the lowest cost form of entertainment there is. And so I think that we're optimistic, and I think it was Tammy that was saying that, here we're looking at it from an LA county perspective and more specifically a Culver City perspective. But globally, people are in theaters depending on where you are. We're still producing a lot of content for that hopeful moment into the future. So, I think that might have been a mouthful for now. I'll pause there, Elaine, and then just kind of let the discussion unfold for the questions that you'll have for all of us.
No, I think that's a really interesting perspective because as LA County residents, we feel very siloed. All these restrictions have been on us the whole time, whereas other parts of the world have been more free. They've been able to do more things, and especially in our nation, there may be places that this is the first time they've ever been in the widespread pandemic, and we're used to it. So that it is interesting, and that's an important note to say that you're not necessarily producing for the people here at home. You're producing globally. And so Len, let's go to you because some of the documentaries you do are about global issues. So tell us a little bit about what's happening with A Very Good Agency and how you're adjusting to the virtual formats.
To me, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking this, the pandemic has just accelerated trends that were already happening anyway. You're seeing huge strides in virtual technology. That goes beyond green screen environments, and now we're getting into volumetric staging. You see it with things like The Mandalorian and Game of Thrones. That's all happening at a big Disney, Marvel, ILM level. But that technology is now coming down. The cost is decreasing. The opportunity is rising. And I think what's really exciting now is the province of those on the technology side, who have been really building this and experimenting with it. Now you're seeing filmmakers and creators start to embrace it. And when you put creatives and tech together, you always get this fantastic alchemy, and things start to happen dynamically, and learning starts to develop faster. And it's been so fascinating for us because we wanted to be on that virtual, even though up until for the past year, about 90 to 95% of what we do has been sort of practical, location-led, practical environment production. We wanted to start embracing virtual. We had a business plan. We wanted to build a 18,000 square foot soundstage. And when the pandemic hit, our first thought was, well, that's gone. And then it was, well, wait a minute. There's an opportunity in this, which is if we redirect our business plan and redirect our footing to become a more enclosed virtual facility, safer for us to work in. We don't have to go out as much. And when we do go out, we can do it on a much smaller footing and start to bring the world into us and connect to it through live streaming and live event and all of that. That became really exciting for us. And as a result, as a small, we're a small company. We don't have big corporate backers and all of that. We're entrepreneurial. The cost started to decrease. We needed a smaller building, which meant our real estate costs were going to drop and our operational costs started to drop. We could do it with smaller crews, and we could be more select about who we were bringing in. We could start to make technology investments that are more scalable. And so we were, once we adjusted that, and we were able to get, not just PPP funding, we got a tiny bit, but we were actually able to get real backing from, banks, traditional small business loans and financing, even in the middle of this pandemic, because the business plan just made sense. It made sense. It wasn't a difficult seller proposition. So what I'm excited about going forward is now what we're starting to do with technology, what we're starting to enable, and our goal, and I know we're not alone in this, is to bring this kind of technology and this kind of virtual footprint down to a much broader client creator level, that it's no longer of a handful of studios, but our commercial clients, our nonprofit clients, our social justice clients, our government clients, and fellow creators, independent creators who just want to come in and explore and experiment and play and see what they can do with this and bring an idea to the table and collaborate. That's what I'm incredibly excited about. So, I think a lot of this was on the horizon anyway. I think now it's accelerating, and I think you're now seeing a lot of creators come into this And I really think, magical things are going to happen. And to Keith's point, now more than ever, we need content to be produced. And this is, if you do it right, it's a so much more efficient way to do it. And I think you're going to get a lot more interesting content and a lot of great creators coming to the table and able to realize ideas through this, which might have been cost prohibitive for them before.
I think that's a really good point. And I think one of the things this pandemic has done, it sort of made everybody kind of step up to technology, step up to the Zoom, step up and really kind of get more familiar with interacting with technology and less about just, being a passive participant. And so talking about participation, let's go to Tammy. Tammy, a lot of the work that Dreamscape does is bringing that individual and having more active interaction. So can you tell us a little bit about how Dreamscape, and similarly with Keith, maybe globally, you guys are still producing. How does that look for you? How is this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Len just said applies very directly to Dreamscape. So we've been a firm believer for a long time that, virtual content, however it's experienced, is the biggest things was the adoption of people at home experiencing virtual reality. And it was the entry, they thought it was just for gamers, etc. And like Keith said and Len saying, you're seeing COVID accelerated people being at home. They had no choice. And obviously the world went through different phases as to when they were at home. And then you see the technology manufacturers, like the most recent Oculus Quest, the prices come down. It's much more nimble. It's more easy for people to consume. And the most important thing is the content isn't just hardcore gaming, right? So if you're seeing content that people of all ages want to experience. So I think Dreamscape, like I said, we're focusing as well on allowing content creators to write for our platform, which can be done in either Unity or Unreal. So if you can code in a gaming language, you can code content for Dreamscape. So eventually that'll open up the content available for our platform tremendously, and you'll be able to consume it at home and not just out of home. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think COVID has required people to think about how they interact. And, it is never going to be exactly the same, right? We will have a vaccine and people will go back, but they'll still go to the movies, of course, but they'll be able to utilize technology more at home and quicker than I think they would have without this pandemic.
Okay. And so, and I think that's an interesting perspective, because one of the questions is, do we think people will go back? Do we think that there will be a return to going to the movie theaters to way things were? Or is this now an evolving interaction with entertainment and film? And what does that look like on a global scale? How does that relate to here in Culver City from a creative economy perspective, but how is that relating globally? So Donna, do you want to talk a little bit about filming globally, and where do you think the entertainment industry is going now, hearing Len and Tammy talk about how it's really being brought home, it's becoming smaller, it's more virtual, where is the place for the big productions, and what does that look like?
I think, unfortunately, with all the changes, there's going to be fewer options. But, obviously everyone's talking about subscriptions to streaming video services, which definitely have soared as of late. And you've heard recently about Warner Brothers announcing their plan with their upcoming feature slate to, release it in the theaters at the same time as online. So I think that's where we're going to see that trend is what we're going to see going forward, I think. And it might become the norm, except for the exception, which used to be the exception. That's where I think we're headed, definitely.
And Keith, what about for you? As you mentioned, your firm is Sony's producing films globally. People are going to the movie theater here at home and in America. Do you think that behavior is going to change? Where does this expansion of creative technology and this more virtual format and the streaming intersect with the typical film going?
Yeah, experience? I guess for me, I agree. COVID itself is a disruptor, as have been other technologies. I concur fully with Len that, certain things were kind of in the pipeline, and this was a great accelerant of that. And I do think that consumer behaviors with any big moments, such as the one in which we find ourselves, they're certainly going to be some changes. Going back to the norm is probably the norm. We'll have to redefine norm, right? But I do think that there are certain experiences that are familiar, that we want to go back to, that are comfortable for us. Certain viewing experiences, just you can't, replicate a theatrical experience of certain films in your home. It's just very different. I mean, if you live in a sprawling estate and you have a 100-inch television, hopefully it's a Sony television. If you've got a private screening room, perhaps, but most people don't have that, right? And so even if they've invested more in technology and means by which to exhibit content, particularly now, certain films like we have, obviously our franchise is Spider-Man. There's certain moments in that, could you watch it the second and third time on a small device or at home? Sure. But there's certain moments there that are really special on a big screen. Same, we have Bullet Train with Brad Pitt in production. That's a big deal movie. It's a big moment. And at the same time, I think that there's a tension between the means at which you can watch content. I think, certainly responding to consumer interest is really critical. And keeping people locked away from things they want is not generally great for business and consumer alike. And so I think there will be some adjustments made. To Donna's point, some of our other colleagues, are making such changes. We at Sony are in a slightly different position. So we do have a streaming service, which is Funimation, which is an anime streaming service, but it's not perhaps as expansive as, say, a Netflix or a Hulu. But what we're doing is we're producing really for all. So we produce for Amazon, we produce for Netflix. So I think there'll be a multitude of different ways in which we go about our business. But, again, like I said from the outset, I'm pretty excited about, people returning to, those moments to go out of their homes. I'm an introvert and I'm still kind of like, I'm ready to get out of here. so I think maybe others, especially extroverts are probably, ready to do the same and go to a regular restaurant and all of that when it's safe to do so.
Well, that leads into the next question. And as we've heard, this pandemic isn't just about the disease itself and the physical ramifications of that. It's also about our mental health and our happiness and how people are managing staying at home and having limited, as Mayor Erickson said, not being able to hug people, not being able to have those experiences that you've just described. So how are your industries supporting mental and emotional health at this point, and where do you think that's going? We've got about 9 minutes left, so I have 2 more questions for you. So if we can be brief, how does your industry, your film is, as what Keith mentioned earlier, you're one of the tenets of how people are surviving this pandemic at home. So what are the ways that you see film and creative economy and virtual reality continuing to support our community until they can have those experiences again? So Len, do you want to take that?
I guess for me, it's two polar that seem on the polar end of things, but actually I think connect quite well, which is escapism, but also connectivity. I think if there's one thing that the entertainment industry has helped us with, it's escapism. It's just getting lost in storytelling and narrative and character and plot and, taking places and kind of reminding us of essential human truths. I could not imagine without complement of streaming services and networks and feeds, that's fundamentally important. And I think there's an educational aspect too. Especially for my kids. But the other side of that is also connectivity, is that, I kind of find that we're returning to those days of water cooler moments where I'm having more connectivity and more conversation with people. Did you see this? Did you watch this? Oh, you got to try this. Let's talk about that, through social media and phone and text and all of that kind of stuff. And also thanks to my Xbox, also gaming, having shared gaming experiences with my older daughter who's stuck in the U members far away. So, I mean, I don't think we're at a kind of a ready player moment just yet where we're completely lost in the tech. But I think it's helping us kind of escape certain realities and sort of and feed our imagination. But at the same time, I think it also is oddly bringing us together in some ways too. And it'll be interesting to see how that duality continues to play out.
Right. Tammy, what about for Dreamscape? How are you seeing an increase absorption of your services?
I mean, we haven't launched to the home yet. We're working on it, but I mean, we're busy creating that potential, vertical. So we have announced our relationship with ASU. So we've been very busy in those verticals, building, prior to a formal launch with them as to the product. But I agree, and I think with employees as well, our employee base is mostly millennials. It's younger, folks, and I think they're not used to not being out and about, right? It's like a whole different. So you just have to there's several different areas you have to look at working in a business. Like, is everyone doing okay, and how can you help them? And yeah, can you have a Zoom happy hour? Maybe, but people are sick of Zoom, right? So what else can you do to maybe connect with them that might help? And I think it's really important to keep all that in mind.
And that is really important, especially for your creatives, because we know that as a creative economy, and especially with millennials, a lot of the draw to these jobs is to inspire creativity, to create that experiential workplace so that, you're spurring that thought process and that collaboration. So let's talk a little bit. Our last question for the day will be to talk about jobs and how your industries are adjusting to the jobs question. And what does it look like from that perspective? Now that we've got, hope is on the horizon and vaccines, we've got protocols, filming's allowed. What do we look like in terms of jobs moving forward? And are you seeing a potential for growth or staying the same or maybe shrinking with some of this virtual capacity? So I'm going to throw that to Keith.
Oh, sure, throw that one to me. I knew it was coming my way too.
You're the biggest one. Hey, go ahead, Zach.
Actually, I think there needs to be, just to be completely candid, some degree of stabilizing. I mean, our leadership team put a strong emphasis. I'm really proud of them for this. Others contracted and we largely didn't. And I think part of that is really looking into the future of what will be needed, to the point of our broader conversation, production, there are greater production needs, not fewer. There are more opportunities for consumers, not less. And so I think being mindful of that, especially how we're positioned. Yes, we're a major studio, but also I kind of find us a little scrappy too, almost kind of like what Lynn was saying, we're a smaller major studio. So I think the future is at least stabilizing, and then we'll see from there. I'm hoping that it's going to be a building moment, for the industry. Certainly, I don't think I'm breaching any confidences. I think we are planning for, not only stabilizing, but the conversations we're having within our HR department around what does growth look like. We're doing forecasting along those lines in this moment. And so I think that makes me optimistic about where we'll be, in 2021, how we roll into 2022 and beyond.
Well, that makes me optimistic too. I'm glad to hear that. Yes, that's great. Donna, tell us about Film LA.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that there were some furloughs going on. Now that there's a vaccine, now that there's protocols, now there's an uptick. What does that look like from a jobs perspective?
Sure, I think it's important to recognize that when this all hit in March, it was like 130,000 jobless claims from the industry. But things are looking better because now we are obviously getting people back to work. A lot of jobs in the industry are small businesses. They're support vendors that employ 10 or less people. So even though people see filming as a big business, it employs small businesses. And so that's really important. Now that the industry is still, exempted, it's able to bring along a lot of small businesses and vendors.
That's great. Keep them essential.
Absolutely.
Len, what about Yes, I love that. Len, tell us about where your work is going in the
I
jobs,
mean,
the jobs
you know,
outlook.
our role is first and foremost to serve our clients, but we also take our role as an employer incredibly joy. Us now having our own production stage is that, you know, Marxist production. So we're not relying anymore on renting stages, and we're not relying on certain things. We can kind of do things in house. So our network, all the people we worked with over the years, that really important thick Rolodex of folks, there is nothing that makes me happier, literally, than being able to call, to call someone and say, look, I got a job. And the thing I'm hearing, and we're non-union. I mean, the union's not really relevant to us. It hasn't made itself relevant to us right now. No disrespect to them. It's just they haven't really,
Right.
at our level, they're not really a benefit to us. But what I'm hearing is, thank goodness people are busy right now. There's productions happening, shoots are happening. I'm calling people and finding out that they're double booked, but they always know somebody else in their network that we can work with and bring in. So I'm bullish on that front. And one of the things I'm super excited about, not just getting the vaccine, which is going to unlock everything, but I saw an article in the LA Times this morning. I think the UCLA policy group is predicting when we get to summer, if the vaccines roll out, we're going to see a roaring 20s style economy. And I think that's going to unleash so much spending and so much pent up energy, to Keith's point, that regardless of what we can watch on our television, I mean, I think people are going to stream back into theaters. I think, hopefully we're going to see this big sort of halcyon moment, in a nice big bubble, economic bubble that's going to sustain. And I think the entertainment industry is just so well poised. I mean, it was anyway. I mean, just think about all the different, the wealth of content that needs to be created just to sustain what we have today and the number of channels, networks, feeds, streamers, etc. I think it's going to continue to multiply. And I think if we can just hang on for the next few months, there's going to be better times for everybody, and we're excited to be a part of that.
So just hanging on. Tammy, we're going to end with you today. And so far, this feels very optimistic. I'm glad this was our last question. There's hope on the horizon. Okay. So what does it look like? How's jobs for
Yeah, we
Dreamscape?
feel the same way. Obviously, we still have several of our sites that are closed. So there are folks with Dreamscape that are still not working, right? And in jobs, corporate jobs are directly tied to the sites because they're closed because they can't open. But we also agree with what Keith, what everyone is saying, is that we think entertainment will come back. We think it'll come back in a big way. People want to get outside the home. They want to do things with other people. And I think, the long-term future for Dreamscape is we're going to grow, especially as we've been expanding in these other areas during COVID, which we hadn't spent as much time on. So I think the long-term is good. Unfortunately, whatever that short-term is, and none of us know exactly how long that is until we, get to that point where people want to leave the home and they feel comfortable doing it, and they want to go interact with other people. But we think it's coming, and it'll be positive.
That's great. So I think as we wrap up today, I think the message is that our creative economy, our entertainment in Culver City is strong. It's stabilizing. We're starting to see an uptick. There are still jobs that are there, and that you, four experts in your field, are seeing that there's optimism and light and hope on the horizon, and that this could come back even bigger for Culver City. So as we continue to grow our creative economy and we grow our industries, entertainment as our bedrock is going to continue to help fuel that bubble, fuel those experiences that our community has, and continue to make Culver City a center of innovation. So with that, I'm going to thank all of you. Donna, so good to see you. Hope to see you this afternoon too.
You will.
Len,
Thank you so much for inviting me.
ERTF, Keith, you're always welcome,
Thank
buddy.
you.
Always welcome. Tammy, so great to meet you.
Okay.
Thank you all. And for everyone that joined us today, we really appreciate you tuning in. There's two more great sessions going ahead. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close this session, and please
Thank
jump into
you.
your next session.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great